Hello, welcome to the Lexolent podcast. My name is Jonathon Davidson. As usual, I'm based here in Dubai. You can follow us at Lexolent, Lexolent on LinkedIn, and it's lexolent.com. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Steve Hunt, who's the principal of Griffins. Griffins are insolvency litigation and forensic experts in London and kind of sit at the top of the boutique space in the area between Magic and Silver Circle. Such thing exists in that world, and the boutique space below it. Stevens, as I said, is in from London today. So welcome, Steve, to our podcast.
Hello, Jono. Thanks for having me.
Let's kick off. So what I like to ask people when I join is everybody that we've spoken to has come from different aspects. We've had funders, we've had private practitioners, we've had tax advisors and the likes. And it's the first time we've spoken to an insolvency practitioner, and certainly first time we've spoken to somebody with the whole depth of experience and very high profile that you have in that industry. So maybe kick off by telling us a little bit about what you do and your history in that space.
Well, I joined Griffins in 1991 as a trainee. I was working in a bank looking at fraud at the time, and somebody said I should apply because I'd be good at it. So I was interviewed by Tim Griffin, and he asked the question, why do you want to be in insolvency? And I just shrugged and went, I have no idea what insolvency is. Someone just said I'd be good at it, so they told me to apply. And here I am 32 years later next month. So, and that's the story of a lot of people in insolvency. They don't tend to start out thinking, as a child, I'd love to get into bankruptcy and things like that. A lot of people are in accountancy firms and just like the general human misery that insolvency generates, or the complicated, tricky problems that it generates. And so that's how I sort of bumbled into it, and I found my niche. It suited it very well. I always had a bit of a sort of fraud bent, very interested in misconduct by human beings. And so very quickly, even in a junior role, I sort of started to nudge the firm in a particular direction. At that stage, there was only about 8 people at Griffins down in an underground bunker in Pimlico. And since then, in 30 years, as I've become a partner, we've done more and more litigious things. The first big case was probably 96, a case called Landau that changed pension law in the UK, and I got a bit addicted to the idea of changing the law. So we've done provisional liquidations for HMRC in the late 90s, which led on to a big fraud action, which led on to chasing fraud around the world with HMRC debt. And we did some misconduct of other insolvency practitioners bled out of that. And then we've done lots and lots of director misconduct. So really, we've developed over the last 30 years a niche practice of exploring every different type of misconduct that we could find and make it sort of our niche.
So you see the best of people, hopefully, at stages, and you very much see the worst of people, I guess, at other stages, because when you step into a situation where a company has become insolvent and you're the administrator or you're the IP that's appointed, I guess you're digging into a book of business that may have genuinely fallen into an impecunious situation, or may have fallen into that situation because of the conduct of certain people. I mean, without mentioning names, and any particular sort of moments that have come to light, which have surprised even you?
Yeah, I think I like to talk to my staff in terms of thinking about the people we deal with as we're seeing people as they are, not as they wish to be presented. So you see degrees of misconduct going from a fiddle through to fraud, and people often don't see where they cross the line, if indeed there is a line. So you see people as they are. It's an opportunity to stop wrongdoing. It's an opportunity to right a wrong, I suppose. There's quite a lot of, in many ways, acting for creditors. You have a sort of moral element until you meet a creditor and realise they possibly are the next debtor. And I've certainly had conversation with creditors where they accuse somebody of fraud, and they know there's a fraud because they've done the same fraud to their creditors further down the chain, which is a very amusing conversation to have. There are innumerable situations where you get thrown into as an insolvency practitioner. Trying to think of one or two is very difficult. I think one of those very early on in my career was a UK company which developed mohair by injecting mohair goat embryos into sheep in Zimbabwe. The sheep were driven across the border to South Africa and then flown to France, where the sheep gave birth to goats. and then the UK company went bust. So our job as UK liquidators were to go to the French farmer whose hillside now occupied these mohair goats, show them an invoice for sheep and say, can I have my goats back, please? Didn't go well. But it's sort of that, again, that opened my eyes to the problems of what you encounter in insolvency. Another one was a cheap and nasty special effects company that were doing special effects very cheaply for a well-known TV program. And they, to simulate a fire, they'd set fire to a lot of pallets in an industrial estate and burn down the entire estate. The fire service were called, who put the fire out and then left, but they hadn't quite finished. So the fire reignited and burned down the other part of the industrial estate that wasn't burned down first time. So the insolvency was dealing with the director's misconduct and also the fire service's negligence in failing to put the fire out the first time. And all this, in my early 20s, this was just amazing to me.
For having started that answer with, I'm not sure I can think of much, you picked two humdingers, so thank you for that. That's very good indeed. The mohair and the estate inferno, very good. Now, from my perspective, we talk about Lexolent. Now, very quickly, Lexolent is in itself a new litigation fund. The chief promoter is Nick Rolls-Davis, who I know you have experience and history with in the funding world as it crosses over into your world. And also, the other thing that Lexolent is, it's the first marketplace which the coding and all of that good stuff is happening to the marketplace and the technology and the website right now. It's going to launch, as is usual, it was going to launch about a week ago, but we're now 6 weeks behind schedule, but we will be launching in the next 6 weeks. And then the market will see how it participates in that. It's where professional services people provide their services and provide the opportunity for cases, and as Nick calls it, deal flow. It's where funders, and they could be conventional funders, they could be people new to the asset class who want to piggyback on conventional funders' expertise, but take parts of an opportunity, parts of a case. So it's really an effort to evolve the market away from a battery of conventional funders. And we all know their names in the UK. There's probably 10 of them. In the last 10 years, we've interchanged between them. So that's what Lexolent is. Now, insofar as your practice is concerned, how have you traditionally interacted with funders? Have they covered your whip? Have they provided money to be able to chase errant funds? How have you traditionally interacted?
Well, starting in the 90s, we were, and to some extent still are, a conditional fee practice. So we started with CFAs as the law developed in the UK. We explored that further. I've again been exploring some of the leading cases on examining liabilities under CFAs and issues like that. So within that structure, the clients that were coming to us were expecting CFA work. And so the introduction of litigation funding was of interest to me as really just another product, I suppose. So I'm looking at it from the office holder point of view, which is I have uncovered a claim and how best to execute it. So I'm coming at it as a pure customer, not a lawyer. And so I'm from where I sit, I look at some lawyers who insist on litigation funding, others who hardly ever use it, some who dabble in it. So from that perspective, that's how I've dealt with it in the past. So I end up using litigation funding at the end of a long process where I examine the alternatives, discuss with creditors, look at the pros and cons. It may suit the lawyers very well, but it doesn't suit the creditors. And so I'm looking very much in terms of all the customers in the chain, what product suits them. And then if it ticks all those boxes, that's when I engage in litigation funding. And it can be all types. It can be very small, limited, or it can be very heavyweight litigation, which is funding myself, lawyers, everything and anything, ancillary litigation, different countries. It depends, and it's good to understand the product in that sort of depth to understand its capabilities. Some cases just can't be run without some form of litigation funding. Yeah,
it's interesting. You look at it as we are trying to evolve the market to look at it, which is another form of corporate finance. It doesn't have to be a very specialized and an opaque world, it can be another form of, and you can use litigation finance for components to finance certain parts of it, be it asset searches, be it experts, be it certain parts of the litigation. So that's very interesting. And when did you first hear about Lexolent, about the project, about the fund, about Nick's new project?
Oh God, I sort of heard about it before I heard the name. I think I knew he was working on a project, and it had been it's last year. I think I can't remember exactly when I first heard the project was unveiled, but I only heard the name quite recently.
Okay, and I think like Lexolent's going to move into try and apply a lot of technology into what it's doing. I think you're already in that space. You and I have spoken about that you pivoted and utilized the time during COVID to put in place a lot of technology in Griffins to apply to how you conduct your business. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, well, we've always used technology. In when I joined in '91, there was the boss's son writing a bit of software that helped run our banking. In the mid-90s, because I'm an ex sort of programmer, all my friends at school went into programming, and I went into this. We've done a lot in-house over the last 25 years or so. And then when it came up to 2019, I started looking at where we were, our niche, looking at the litigation funding question, and I wondered whether or not these experts in the market had some special software that enabled them to run cases in a different way. So I started at the end of 2019, early 2020, talking to litigation funders about their software. It became apparent that they were running things mostly from spreadsheets, and you had sort of back office geeks with spreadsheets and salespeople at the front without anyone really joining all that up. So while that was in my mind, lockdown happened. It went very quiet for quite a while. So we decided as a firm to sort of take all the long-term projects off the shelf and do those while we were waiting for the market to restart. So in-house, we started programming a first version of what we just call the commercial review software, which just brought together the concepts of litigation, client service, funding, waterfalls, and just got to grips with what is the question, what would we write? And now we are 3 years or so later, and it runs our firm completely. It's got different versions, different structures, different ways of viewing the data, but essentially it's all the data is being fed into our software, and it helps everyone understand where they are. And so new modules involving automatic waterfalls for litigation funding is on the way, but it develops a tighter link to the lawyers with numbers. All the parties involved, including creditors, will get a better understanding of the decisions they're making, the financial consequences. So it doesn't predict wins or losses or anything like that. It doesn't deal with that. It deals with the consequences of decisions, no matter who makes them. And if different people are making different decisions at different aspects of the strategy, the process, the litigation, the wider insolvency, that all comes in. So you could have one case with no assets and its sole asset is a claim, and another case, identical claim, identical value, but it has other assets which can be used to partially fund. And so what we're looking at is understanding on a case-by-case basis what the framework is for the decision, what choices does the insolvency practitioner have to progress the case. And that's the key part of that software. And it sounds like it integrates exactly into what you're doing.
Interestingly, it does. I mean, we are looking at different parts of it. Nick's team have partnered with a think tank that is in association with Cambridge University, and that's evolved onto the large language modeling. Now, I know the whole world, my LinkedIn is inundated with information and narratives about AI and LLM, large language modeling, etc. And I'm trying to get a handle on what it means and how it can improve and affect the market. So the discussions that I've been party to with the joint venture partner is that in terms of how Lexolent will engage, the funding industry, it would like to create standardized documentation in terms of how you present a case or the first iterations of a case to the platform. The platform initially will have human resources behind it, but then the machine learning will, and we've done some sandboxing, some quite significant sandboxing on this. So a lot of testing is happening at the moment. And what we're finding is that the large language models learn relatively quickly, and they can get a case into a space where it would take a human or a team of underwriters or reviewers probably 3 to 4 weeks, and it can do it in by as long as the information is submitted in the right way, it can get there in a day. So we're not hoping to substitute human beings by any means. The final gatekeepers will be a team of underwriters and reviewers who've been with Nick for 10 years. And have been, part of his previous iterations in various listed companies, and are the backbone of that review to approve for funding or otherwise. But how they get there will be speeded up, we think, fairly exponentially, because the information, the data will be complete, and it'll be presented to them as more or less a fait accompli. So that's what we're working towards, and that's kind of the arbitrage. But it sounds like what you have created is ahead of the game, and something that's probably right to tip over with some sort of research into AI and LLM. Have you looked into that world? Have you had a bit, because you're quite a cerebral guy. You like to sort of know what's going on around you. Have you had a look into the AI world yet?
Well, the latest version of the commercial review that we're beta testing is a button at the end. What happens is, having made decisions, we basically review every case quarterly, financially, see if it's changed, the target's assets, everything about the case. And then I push the button at the end, and it feeds directly into our cash flow forecasting and other data, and writes into all our different areas the consequence of the decision. And we've allied to that a document function, which effectively automatically writes a letter to our lawyers explaining all the numbers in English so that they can understand it, and explains the risks, explains just what we're doing, the consequences stuff. And that was all auto written. At the same time, I came across ChatGPT for the first time, and it looks the same. It's writing out slowly, so it looks identical when it's generated. It was quite smart. None of ours is AI at all. It's much more basic than that, I would say. But it's doing the same thing. It's making decisions based on the available data. So yes, it's the sort of the commercial review starts at there's the end, which sort of comes to you, I suppose, which is the we have a case, here's the financials, how it stacks up, and all that material as part of the strength of the case, which would be separate. At the other end of it, we're looking very much at sort of the sort of claim at the earliest possible stage, in terms of where do these claims sit pre-insolvency or just generally in the market. By what route do they come to our attention? So think of how many cases, great cases, end up with insolvency practitioners who don't do litigation at all, and they just fail, or they go into a turnaround process where there's no concept of looking at the claims that might be there, which could be bigger than the value of selling the business as a going concern. There's a lack of seeds being sown, as it were, for later professionals such as you and I to harvest. So we're very much looking at the commercial review end of that software, where we're looking at how many cases are being missed and what could be done to turn them into value. I was at a conference last week where a firm dealing in East Anglia was looking at just smaller cases, but again, the same sort of thing. They're latching onto the idea of, is there a way of just finding these cases and giving them to an expert to develop? But even that puts it into the hands of the person who's got to choose to engage their services. So if the person, the insolvency practitioner, has no real litigation experience, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what cases could be slipping through their hands. And so I'm spending time just thinking about that question at the moment and how that could be enhanced, because we have a sort of strapline, I suppose. This software, we're hoping to double the amount of litigation in insolvency. It's a very broad speak, but it encapsulates what we're trying to do. We're not trying to just do the cases better, which we are. We're trying to find ways of encouraging more claims to be examined, and therefore some will go into the market in litigation funding and other ways to benefit creditors. So all of that is part of the challenge. And if there's more people like myself doing the same thing, then your market will expand.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds like we should DM on this. I learned what DM was the other day, so I now know how I can do that. We should DM on this, because
in my day, I think it was a good kicking back in the day, but that's
exactly, yeah. It was a very nice pair of boots, wasn't it? So seriously, no. So a part of what the marketplace is intended to do is to do exactly that. Because our analysis and the general market analysis shows that fundable cases the penetration is 20-30%. So people who really don't know about funding, they're not aware, and they have grievances and they have cases, and they simply haven't explored them because they put them to one side because they're too much of a headache. So those are the kind of cases we are looking to eke out. And what we want the marketplace to expand to such an extent that it's accessible globally to everybody. Now, part of that marketplace will concentrate on insolvency situations, which is something which feeds directly into your expertise. So let's do that Doc Martens thing a bit later and see if we can have a chat about that. So in particular, where's Griffins' growth now? Where's the forward track for Griffins in terms of interesting and exciting projects you feel you might get involved in the next 5 years?
We've changed so much in lockdown. We had a rethink of our client base, our structures, everything, and probably I think at our peak we were probably 1,500 live insolvencies, was quite a lot for a firm our size. And now we're probably about 300-400, but our work in progress is about the same. So effectively, with the size of the cases, average has been 4 or 5 times the size, and they're run quite differently. And we are now working much more in the sort of general commercial creditor space than previously we were in regulatory and governmental stuff. So against that, I think we're seeing at the moment we're seeing large, interesting projects where we can give a spin because of our. Although we do all sorts of insolvency, we're known mostly for the litigation stuff and the unconventional stuff. So a very conventional trading administration has a spin on it that we give it in terms of exploring the assets that may not have appeared in the statement of affairs, the claims that were forgotten or not pursued in other areas. We're very keen at stripping out. So yes, there's a lot of work in that sort of area. We're doing a bit more nationwide, a bit more internationally. We've always done. The last 15 years, you and I met in Dubai several times. We're doing a bit more there, but I think it's just looking at the market. It seems to be a dissatisfaction with some creditors as to outcomes, as to the insolvency profession itself. We're being asked to replace top tier insolvency firms on a regular basis, not through any accusation against them of wrongdoing. They just seem to want a better service, or they want something a bit more dynamic. So there's a move in the market for creditors to be a bit more muscular, and I don't think they're asking for litigation funding at the moment, but they're looking at it, and they're also looking at it on a sort of dabbling basis. Can they put in 10% and the litigation fund and put in 90%, that type of thing? So they're looking at how to change their business models as well. So I see it's quite exciting. I see that there's an awakening in the market to all these facilities. Doing it in a different way, taking assignments of claims, using treating the claims like houses. Really, you know, if you've got a house, you know how to sell it. There's estate agents and things like that. There's a very conventional market. Insolvency practitioners are starting, and also creditors are starting to stop poking these things with a stick and wondering what they are, and starting to have their own policies. So, in terms of where I see litigation funding in ourselves, is very much sort of. We're going through the education stage with some large creditors into the joint planning stage. I think that's what's going on. So they're having made them aware of the tools. We're now thinking about what's good for them that works, and then as a byproduct of that, we get engaged to facilitate that. So it's very much, in terms of my work, is thinking about the creditor process and opening their eyes to all the facilities in the market, all the different types of law firms, funding structures, to give them the best opportunity to achieve their goals, whatever they may be.
No, it actually fits perfectly into what is Lexolent we are trying to do as well. I couldn't have said it better. The portal wants to expand visibility of funding and everything that goes around funding. It doesn't want funding to be seen as an all or nothing. It needs to fit into, there's no one size fits all. So we want to evolve from the investor side. We want to evolve the asset class as an investment, so they can come in and take syndication, they can take trades, they can take primary roles, they can copy trade on other more experienced people in the market. So all that is part of the evolution we're trying to push out. And on the professional services and ancillary side, we want people to engage in the portal. Ideally, we're ever so hopeful that it will scale, it will become globally accessible. And we'll be looking at situations in the UK, Europe, Middle East, Asia, and obviously for the global market, the US is a huge market. Steve, that's fantastic. I think we've covered a lot. I'm absolutely fascinated by your world, and I bet we could tell a lot more stories if we had time. But I'm gonna wrap up. And again, you and I, let's have a direct conversation, and maybe we can see more of what you're doing on the Lexolent platform as we get through the next 3 to 6 months. So thank you very much appreciate your time. And I'll just sign off by saying, again, follow us on LinkedIn, Lexolent, Lexolent. And thanks again to Steve Hunt at Griffins. Cheers, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Johnny.